Hello and welcome back. So today we're going to be working with R to do ChiSquared tests. So once again, in my R console, I have my data set foo, and I have separated out all those variables as we've done just about every other video before. Over here I have my text document, ChiSquared and R. And so we'll walk through how to do and look at ChiSquared analysis. So this is one of the few tests that we have this semester to look at the differences or similarities between two qualitative variables. And so as we've also talked about, one of the ways we summarize qualitative variables is by using a contingency table. So I'm going to create the contingency table for sex and athletes. We could use sex and athletes. We could use sex and vehicle or athlete and vehicle, since those are our qualitative variables in our data set. So I'm going to name it TBL, and I'm going to use that xtabs function again. Sex plus athlete, and I can look at that by doing that. So when we're working with this ChiSquared test, again, it's going, we're not going to be so concerned with the order in which things are going to be run. We're really just checking for dependence between these two variables. Is your sex and whether or not you're an athlete dependent upon each other? So we don't need to worry about the order in which things are going so much as we did with proportions tests. This data can be run if you don't have a data set built into R already. It's not going to make a whole lot of sense to do an Excel file with maybe just 2 columns or 2 rows or anything like that. So I do have a little bit of code here if you wanted to set up your own data set. So let's call a variable x, and it's going to get 2 values, maybe 24 and 37. And I'm using the C function here to hold those. And I'm going to have another variable y, and it's going to take on 13 and 29. So if you don't have a data set, this is a quick and dirty way to make your own table. I could use, just call it table, and I'm going to use the column combined function. cbind x and y, and then if I look at the table, there you go. So it's combined these two data sets by their columns. So either way, we can use a ChiSquared test on either one of these. I'll start out with our TBL object. So test 1 is what I'll call it, and we're going to use the sq.test function. And here's another instance where we need to add this correct equals false. It's going to be doing some more advanced statistics than I'd want it to at this level. So just add this correct equals false. That's all that code is going to need. As we talked about, the hypotheses are a little bit different for this. We don't have a sign that we need to worry about. So I have this object stored in test 1. It's going to give me an error. It's the same error we saw when working with proportions in this data. It just really means we don't have enough data to look at this, and we'll see why in a minute. So here is the ChiSquared test. It gives me my p-value here, and we know that we need to look at the expected counts for this test to make sure we pass that assumption. So I'm going to do test 1 $, expected. And when I hit enter, it's going to show me the expected counts for this data set. And as we talked about, R is really warning us that we're not passing this expected count assumption, that we need to have all these counts greater than 5. So if you see this warning, odds are you're not passing that assumption, and we need to be curious and cautious with using this p-value. Just to show you what a test will look like if you don't have a warning message, I will use test2, and I'll use my table that I input. And now we don't have that warning message to come with it. And if we look at the expected counts, and we spell it correctly and add the 2, so now we see all of our expected counts are greater than 5. We had no error. We could trust this p-value, although it's not significant. So coding's getting a little bit easier as we're getting into more difficult content. Hopefully it's not going to trip you up too much. If you do have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, come back next week and we'll have our last little video for how to do these things in R. So take care. See you then.